In 1526, a man with just 12,000 soldiers walked into a trap set by 100,000 men and 1,000 war elephants. Within hours, the elephants were trampling their own masters, and a new superpower was born. This is the Mughal Empire, a state that eventually controlled 25% of the global economy, built the Taj Mahal, and mastered rocket warfare, only to be dismantled by a single private company with just 125 shareholders. Why did this happen? It is because they were running what we might call a Conquest Ponzi Scheme, a system that worked perfectly until it ran out of new land to sell. History isn't just a list of names, it's a diagnostic tool. By looking at the Mughal operating system, we can see the exact same patterns that cause modern monopolies and global superpowers to fracture today. To understand how the Mughals failed, we first have to understand the incredible technology that made them successful. In the early 16th century, Babur possessed a black swan technological edge, gunpowder and cannons. While his rivals relied on traditional cavalry and elephants, Babur used Ottoman-style artillery and matchlocks to shatter his opponents, despite being at a massive numerical disadvantage. This gunpowder edge created a massive barrier to entry for any other regional powers. But an empire cannot survive on cannons alone. It needs a way to govern. Babur's grandson, Akbar, realized that a small Muslim elite could only rule a massive Hindu majority if the state functioned as a neutral platform. He instituted the inclusion algorithm, officially known as Sul-e-Kul, or universal toleration. Akbar abolished the hated jizya tax on non-Muslims and invited scholars from every faith, Hindus, Jains, Zoroastrians, and even Christians, to debate in his house of worship. By integrating the local elite into his government, he turned potential enemies into invested stakeholders. This was managed through a brilliant but dangerous administrative rank system called the Mansabdari System. Every officer was a Mansabdar, ranked by how many horses and soldiers they could provide to the emperor. In exchange for their loyalty, they weren't given a salary in cash. They were given jagirs, the right to collect taxes from specific pieces of land. This made the nobility incredibly powerful, but entirely dependent on the emperor's favor for their wealth. Supporting this war machine was a massive bureaucratic tax engine. The Mughals standardized the silver rupee and introduced the zabt system, a monetary tax based on uniform land surveys. Because taxes had to be paid in silver, peasants were forced into global market networks to sell their crops. This created an economic boom that made India a global manufacturing hub, producing 25% of the world's industrial output, particularly in textiles and shipbuilding. However, there was a virus in the Mughal code, the succession protocol. Unlike European monarchies, where the oldest son usually inherited the throne, the Mughal system followed the principle of takht ya tahta, the throne or a funeral. Every time an emperor died, a zero-sum civil war broke out among his sons. These recurring system reboots were violent, expensive, and destroyed the systemic trust required to keep the empire stable. Under Emperor Shah Jahan, the empire reached its peak of architecture of prestige. He built the Taj Mahal and the Red Fort as monuments to his greatness, using silver and marble as if they were ordinary stones. But this conspicuous consumption hid a hollowed-out treasury. The cost of maintaining the court and these massive building projects began to exceed the revenue coming in from the land. Then came the final crash under Emperor Aurangzeb. He abandoned the platform strategy of tolerance and attempted to impose an orthodox Islamic state reintroducing the tax on non-Muslims and destroying temples to send political messages. This alienated the very stakeholders who kept the empire running. But the real killer was the Conquest Ponzi Scheme, reaching its limit. To keep his generals loyal, Aurangzeb needed new land to give away as jagirs. He spent 27 years in a feudal war to conquer the Deccan Plateau in the south. The empire expanded to its greatest territorial extent, but it was an imperial overstretch. They had run out of land to give, and the treasury was bankrupted by constant warfare. When the system finally glitched, the corporate raid began. The British East India Company didn't arrive as a conquering army. They arrived as a startup seeking a trade permit. They were patient, waiting for the right opportunity to perform a hostile takeover. By allying with disgruntled local factions and using superior military technology, they slowly replaced the Mughal bureaucracy with their own corporate structure. By 1765, the emperor was forced to grant the company the Diwani, the official right to collect taxes in Bengal. A private corporation had effectively outsourced an empire's own downfall. The lesson of the Mughals is a diagnostic for our modern world. Growth without institutional stability is just a long-term collapse. The Mughal pattern is identical to modern hyper-growth companies that burn through venture capital to acquire market share, but collapse the moment they hit geographical or economic limits. When your power relies on constant expansion and personal loyalty rather than resilient, neutral systems, you aren't building an empire. You are simply a giant waiting for a small enough disruptor to find your off switch.